Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
We were just kind of talking offline, the marriage of dystopia and possibility. It's an interesting place to be. It's not something new. We've been there. Maybe it's something, though, that could be highlighted for more people, just the reality that we are at this intersection. We've been here for a while. I think your thoughts are similar to mine based on following your social media and your posts and so on and so forth. But your quick sort of overview of what to make of this moment in time.
Well, pardon me while I just think for a second.
Sure.
I'm making sense of it extemporaneously because it's happening in real time, you know. Before I start pointing fingers, I think that there are fundamentals probably that transcend the pointing of fingers that I think it's interesting to look at. Everything from the way consciousness works to the way that we perceive trust, how trust arises, and then the interesting relationship between trust and truth, which are in my view, almost antithetical to one another, interestingly. So for instance, there's something called predictive mind theory, which basically says we have a map of the world in our brains, and our brains are basically trying to associate all of our environment into the map so that we can interact with our environment as automatically as possible using the least amount of energy possible, right? The principle of least action, which sort of governs the universe in general, also governs our mind. So we trust things which are redundant. I trust Bill if it's the same Bill today that I met yesterday, and this one yesterday will be the Bill tomorrow, and so on, and then trust is gained. It's sort of like this process of redundancy. But that doesn't equal truth. And what we actually seem to correspond truth to is an error in that prediction mechanism. So when we encounter an error, when suddenly Bill is not Bill, and he's suddenly acting like a totally different person, all of a sudden, all the trust is eroded and exploded. I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't Bill. I'm getting a revealing here. He's revealing something to me. And this is the real Bill, right? So we have this sense of like, oh, that was a lie. This is the truth. So when we encounter an error, we seem to equate it with like an underlying, more fundamental truth. And Trump is pure prediction error. Everything he does triggers a prediction. He does everything that you don't think is supposed to happen, giving fellatio to a microphone, dancing on stage for 40 minutes instead of giving a speech, Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off on stage to introduce him. Everything is wrong, and thereby he gains some kind of semblance of like a sensation of truthfulness. It's a very strange correspondence between trust and truth. And at the same time, this principle of least action means we want to think as little as possible in the most effective way possible. Essentially, we want to take the freeway, not the scenic route when we're thinking, because otherwise we're wasting a lot of energy. And Trump does something which, you know, there's a phrase I like, which is that all thinking converges on thoughtlessness, because thoughtlessness is the most efficient way to behave. Well, I think maybe all governance converges on dictatorship in the same way, because there's a guy who says, I will take care of everything for you. You don't have to think about things. And the last time we spoke, which I don't remember when it was, but I was probably on the heels of a project I had put a lot of effort into called Proxy Vote, which was a direct democracy app. And actually, we spoke after this, but I had put a lot of effort into a direct democracy app. Every single bill through Congress would come to your phone, and you could vote yourself on any bill in Congress. And then I started a super PAC in a PAC that got federal congressional candidates to pledge that they would listen directly to the will of their constituency on any given bill and vote accordingly. Right? It was just a pet project. I thought the hardest thing was going to be getting the candidates to agree to this. That was the easiest part because they're already politically motivated. The hardest part was getting people to give a shit.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was like, but we're giving you all the power. And essentially what they've said back was, we don't want all the power. That's too much heavy. That's a cognitive load I don't have time for. I want the most efficient possible thing. So once every 4 years, I can get really drummed up about an election. But after that, I'll think about some chunky issues, but I can't spend the time reading bills. And, we would summarize them in simple language and so on, but it didn't matter. And anyway, so I think that where I'm obviously at is, or maybe it's not so obvious, but where I'm at is I'm thinking about, this is such a crisis that I'm thinking about the fundamentals, not simply how do we patch things up and move forward, but like what's actually going on? What is government to people who want to economize their thinking so much that their ideal form of government is that which like circumvents the need to think? And then, and then of course the other thing is, to what extent is politics simply a proxy for belonging? I mean, to what extent do people actually care about the issues versus to what extent are they using the issues as a belonging mechanism? Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of that on both sides. And that's the entree, and for me, into looking in the mirror on the left. I think a lot of us on the left have lost sight of the fundamental systematic mode of progressivism that had dominated for such a long time, influenced by socialism and so on. And even influenced by, W.E.B. Du Bois' the original conception of whiteness as a compensation mechanism to the working white class, whereas now whiteness is generally understood to be, erroneously or not, as just an identity politics disease that white people have. So we've really lost, and the memification of everything hasn't helped. We've lost so much nuance. Every time I'm hesitant to share anything because the compression factor and the information loss. So we're in a very difficult predicament, because if we want to, anytime we want to share a revelation, we usually do it through some kind of mimetic format. Everything gets compressed, all the nuance gets lost, some 1 or 2 words gets pulled out of it, and it gets used to create these struggle, to embolden these struggle clusters, which is what I call them. And the extent to which the people within those clusters actually care about that struggle as much as they care about perpetuating that struggle is very difficult to ascertain. For instance, I'm someone who believes, I could be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, that a Trump presidency means, spells a larger disaster for the Palestinian people and for the Middle East generally. And if that's an issue I care about, then I don't want someone who will be impervious to overtures from the left, because the left are the people who care about potentially a two-state solution. Now, when I see people who say they really care about Palestine and they're pro-Palestine, they want to see a two-state solution and they want the genocide to end, when I see them decide that all genocides are the same, as soon as you qualify for a genocide, it's a genocide, and genocide is genocide, and there's no nuance there, it's just genocide. and one genocide must be as bad as the other. And like, once you lose your ability to see that the lesser of two evil is the lesser of two evils because they're a lesser of two evils, and that actually the greater of two evils is impervious to your overtures, and it will be much worse for the very people you're advocating for. Once we lose sight of that, I have to think that at a collective level, we suffer from the same thing that psychologists see us suffer at an individual level, which is people who suffer very often create the conditions, unconsciously or consciously, for that suffering to continue because they have identified themselves with the suffering. So essentially, I see society as this enclave of struggle clusters for whom the struggle is more important than the overcoming of the struggle they say they want to overcome, because the very struggle is the portal to their identity. And when we're in that kind of identity paradigm, things get really topsy-turvy, because it's almost impossible to have a conversation with anyone, because their struggle is more important to them than the resolution of their struggle.
Yeah. So smart. I agree with all of that 100%. And I think when you look at the first portion of your thoughts there, and even the experiment, or actually not even an experiment, the activation of your concept of get bills delivered to your phone so we can eliminate the republic element of democracy. And that result of, well, people, they'd rather, by and large, or in large numbers anyway, they'd rather just handle it every 4 years, check in, check out, and exist in these struggle clusters. It's almost the death knell for anything anarcho-syndicalist wise, or even a return to some kind of, you don't even have to call it socialism, but any kind of just true equity. It's almost like there's a built-in psychological nuance that enough people are willing to say, forget it at this point in time. And it creates conditions for the environment that we're in right now.
Bartholomew Town.
Birds are disappearing from our landscape at a rapid pace. Over 1/3 of those breeding on Audubon Society of Rhode Island's wildlife refuges are in decline. Climate change has taken a toll on their migration, nesting, and food sources. While science is highlighting the problem, Audubon is working on real solutions with a plan to rapidly reduce their carbon emissions. The organization will be free of fossil fuels by 2030, with renewable energy powering Audubon's buildings, equipment, and vehicles. To shape our future, all of us must act. Learn more about Repowering Audubon, their avian research, and how you can join their fight for climate resiliency. Visit asri.org/repower. Newport Film screens the latest, critically acclaimed documentary films year-round across Rhode Island. Like a film festival, Newport Film often gets early access to films before they're available online or in the theaters. Stay up to date on their latest screening events at newportfilm.com or on Instagram @NewportFilm. Are you looking to advance in your career or explore a new field? The University of Rhode Island now offers a comprehensive portfolio of fully online programs designed to bring world-class education to you anytime, anywhere. Choose from a wide range of flexible, asynchronous programs in business and leadership, data, tech and STEM, healthcare and pharmacy, marine and environmental science, and more. With expert faculty and innovative courses, you'll gain the skills and knowledge to thrive in today's competitive world. Are you ready to take the next step? Visit uri.edu/online and discover how URI Online can help you achieve your goals. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communication, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. As Rhode Island's first ever member-owned credit union, Navigant Credit Union has been a staple in the local business community for more than 108 years. Today, Navigant is a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org.
Yeah. Yeah, we seem to, there may also be, just like, again, I'm thinking very fundamentally. So some of the listeners might be, what the fuck does this have to do with politics? But
Right.
so there's two basic fundamental forces in cosmology. Like one is entropy and the other is like negative entropy. One disperses everything, makes everything equal, like equilibrium, so that like, all the gases have equilibrated and you don't see any planets because nothing is clumped together. But when things do clump together, they become identifiable. That's negative entropy, right? So then those things burst and they disperse. And scientists like to tell us, and cosmologists like to tell us, that the universe is headed toward a final entropy, a universal heat death where all of the energy will be the same across space and time. So I won't be able to tell Bill from Alex because we will have the same energetic value and will essentially be the same stuff. Now, that is a universal heat death. They call it a death because you won't have any difference. You won't be able to see the difference between Bill and Alex. And so there is no life to experience because everything is the same. That's the power of entropy. Negative entropy is the power to keep things different. So, for instance, a refrigerator is a negative entropy thing because it's able to keep things cold. If you didn't have the refrigerator, everything would become room temp. Everything would equilibrate and have the same temperature, same energetic frequency. Now, if we think of progressivism, we could go from cosmology to politics, right? We think of progressivism as like everyone should be the same. Everyone should equal rights, and we want everyone to be the same. And we have all these the equanimity as our general MO. And you have conservatives saying, no, we want difference. Everyone should be different. And you have these two forces fighting each other, right? Progressivism wanting everything to be the same, and conservatives wanting, difference. And, I like white people because they look the same as me, or I want stronger borders, keep people out, preserve our culture, and so on. And then you have the left that's like, no, let them in, let us mingle, let it all sort of equilibrate. And now, this is difficult for me to say and I like challenging myself on all these things because I'm a liberal. Like I've always been a liberal. I've been a socialist when I was 18. I'm very into this. But then I'm like, but if liberalism is entropy, and entropy eventually equilibrates such that there is no difference, and you have a global monoculture, which is essentially the death of difference, the death of interestingness. And then I'm starting to tour around as a musician. I'm going from LA to New York to San Francisco to here to there. And as the years have gone by, I realize, wait, I'm traveling to the same city everywhere I go. I am in a monoculture. And that I equate some of that with the liberal impulse or the progressive impulse to create sameness and so on. Now, forget progressivism and conservatism. I'm just talking about sort of gas and brakes, like make everything the same or put brakes and make things different. And we have gotten to a place where I have to question my own ideology with regard to everyone should be this, we should all have the same rights, same rights, same rights, same rights. Now, on a right level, it makes sense. We should all have the same rights. But what I'm seeing now, even with woke, like for me, woke is hyper-conservative in the framework that I just mentioned, because woke is all about a re-tribalization. I'm this, I'm essentially this. I'm not contextually this. I didn't choose to be this. I was born this. I'm an AFAB. I'm an AMAB. You are this. You can't play me if you're an actor. You can't play me in a movie because you are not actually that thing. You have to be actually that thing. A very essentialized way to look at things, where we have these tribes, and those tribes should actually stay separate. So everywhere you're almost seeing this like reaction, including woke, this conservative reaction against equilibrating everything, against the sort of entropic slide of progressivism. We're now returning to this sort of re-tribalized state where everyone is sort of existing in their own little tribes. And so that's another political aspect that I find fascinating. Like, to think of woke as hyper-conservative is, of course, strange, but just on the level of making everyone different and creating all these different little containers to preserve difference. Obviously that's going to create political paradigms that become very difficult to deal with. But figuring out what the underlying drive toward a retribalization is, I think the drive toward it is that we somehow got to a place where everyone felt like, take Kendrick's song, Not Like Us, right? Mm-hmm. Biggest hit of the last year. It's a perfect sort of emblem or theme song for any tribe, because one of the main ways you establish your own identity is to say, we are not like them, they are not like us, we are different. And I think that mood, the general mood of not like us, is a very conservative move. And and I don't know where I stand in that, because I don't really I don't feel like I have a horse in that race. Maybe it's because I'm a white man, but I could, if I wanted to, see being a white man as my big crucible, because obviously that's what a lot of the reactionary anti-woke people have been able to do. Like, white people, imagine you're a white man, you've grown up, you're like, oh God, if only I could have this struggle, like a real struggle, like a Black American, or like a this, or a Native American, or queer. Oh, if only I was queer. And then all of a sudden you're being demonized as a white man. You're like, this is it. This is my time. And I feel like they've really, the right has really, and young men have really latched onto that as a cause to life, as a meaning crucible. And so that's what I see a lot, is just this sort of this hunt for meaning. And I think a lot of us, especially on the left, we were running out of, it is not popular to say, and people get lambasted for implying that history has actually progressed and that things have actually gotten better over time. Like Steven Pinker, like the left hates him because he's implied that throughout the course of the last 10,000 years, things have gotten incrementally better. It's like, no. Now, why would people get so upset at the idea that things have progressed at all? Well, because when you admit that things have progressed, you feel like you're putting at risk the very fire that you have to change things in the first place. It's much easier to say things have never changed. They're never gonna change unless we do this. But if you're like, well, things have changed a lot, it's harder to get all amped up about change, right? And yet change does happen. So we're like lying to ourselves. The fact is, things have changed so much and progressed so much that we now sort of almost manufacture our own discontents so that we have something to change. And I think the left is doing that. It's not that I don't respond to a lot of the desires for change that left has, but we are clearly running out of extant oppressions and developing new ones just to remain within the froth of struggle. And the downside of this for me is that we're losing sight of the original struggle of the left, which was primarily economic based,
right?
And systemic. So that's annoying for me. Growing up as I know I'm hogging all the airtime, but I don't know how old you are, but you probably remember the 90s.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. You remember when selling out was a thing?
Absolutely.
You realize it's no longer a thing. Have you noticed that?
Right. Well, it's almost like, if you think of it like for our purposes in music, it's that's gone away partially because of industrial changes, and it's gone away because of maybe a flattening of, in some people's eyes anyway, the playing field because of social media, and because if you're on stage at an event supporting a Democratic candidate, no one would ever think that, wow, this person, traded in their core values to be there. They think of it as an ascension to either deliver their values to a wider audience or not even pay attention to the notion of selling out isn't even something that's on a certain generation's or maybe or all of our minds anymore.
Yeah, the only instance of selling out that I heard recently was that if Billie Eilish didn't wear baggy pants, she had sold out.
Right.
So like a pure aesthetic, but like, like Kendrick Lamar recently did an Amex commercial. Now,
Yep.
even the hip hop community back like throughout the 90s, you just never saw anybody do anything like that. Never mind like, Kurt Cobain or something for Amex. Could you imagine? Like
Right.
that would be like the most crazy shit ever.
Yeah.
But these days, it's changed. Now you can point to, well, we don't sell as many CDs, and so the economics like require that we supplement our income elsewhere. But I don't know the extent to which that actually holds water anymore, because people are earning a fair amount of money, especially someone like Kendrick Lamar with those streaming numbers. Like people who stream a lot earn quite a lot. But something has shifted, and it's part of the identity politics thing, where if the you know if the white man, as opposed to like, it was much, we had a much clearer picture of systemic injustice when it was the man, when the man was the bad guy, and it was all about the man. But as soon as it became the white man, it of course allowed, like, then all of a sudden all we want is a multicultural set of overlords, and then we're good, because it's all about representation. And I think the left has just, I've written about this a bit, but the left has lost, as soon as we got into sort of the idea of representation, and representation is important on a certain level, but for representation to supplant the entire notion of sort of economic justice or power injustices, where because we have a black CEO as the CEO of Coca-Cola, all of a sudden, like, we're really making progress. Meanwhile, Coca-Cola is creating, diabetes 2 generationally for Black Americans, is somehow overlooked and made okay because Coca-Cola has really inclusive commercials. So the issue has been really muddied by, and I'm not saying anything new. I just don't know how to solve this thing. We're clearly going through some kind of process, but I hope, back to your original question, what this election does is crystallize some of that. And the fact that I even feel comfortable talking about some of this openly now, like, I have to credit this failure, because without this bubble being popped, it was still basically illegal on the left to even say what I'm saying just 3 weeks ago. So, because you would, like, at least in this moment, there is a crack of light where we can actually talk about things honestly. And I think that's another big problem. We made it impossible to talk about things honestly without maybe risking your entire career. And I don't even know if it's safe to talk about it now, but I'm taking the chance because I think this is, if we have a chance to talk about stuff, it's now.
Yeah. The reflection piece it's so bifurcated. I mean, there's the obvious people who are spiking the football because Trump won. So great. All right. That's predictable. What was really surprising to me, and what's been surprising in different forums, whether it's at the town square level, just talking with people in the Northeast, whether it's reactions to social media posts or reactions to podcasts or TV or radio stuff I've done, whatever, is the amount of people who, whether it's easy to call them neoliberals, but people on the left who have said, no, you're wrong, because, at the end of the day, the only reason why Democrats lost this election is because either one, it's a purely racist country, which no doubt those seeds are there. I mean, that's obvious. Or two, people just were brainwashed by Trump, which is undoubtedly a factor as well. Of course, there's been extensive propaganda and effective propaganda, but it's more than that, because there are way too many smart, good people in this country that would be able, with just a baseline level, to resist that. So there has to be another step, and that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. I don't. No matter how upset I might have been about this or that, or how annoying it would be to feel everything I just discussed, and the retribalization and the sort of really quite fascistic self-policing. I mean, we've been living in a self-police state, which I think in some ways is worse than a police state, because it's all pervasive. It's not like you can get away to your little like enclave and then like chill. It's like everyone was a cop. I still couldn't even imagine doing a protest vote for Trump. Like I couldn't. There's no way. But I know a bunch of people who are otherwise Democrats who did, because they were just like, they couldn't take it. And by the way, none of them mentioned the economy, which is an interesting, and now, you know, I'm a very small sample size, but I've read a lot of other people having the exact same experience. And I wish it was all Palestine. I don't know anybody who voted for Trump because of Palestine. I read people saying they were going to vote third party because of Palestine. And I probably know a few people that voted. I do actually know a few people that voted third party because of Palestine. But they also, all of those people knew that Jill Stein wasn't going to win. So it was like a protest vote, and most of those people were in a safe state. So they get to be all self-righteous and do the right thing and not risk anything, which is fine. But the people that I know that actually switched to Trump, it was on cultural issues. Now, is Bernie right? If, you know, and by the way, Bernie's being slightly, I don't want to say he's being dishonest, but I feel like he's a politician. I think he's leaving one aspect out when he's like, we didn't focus on the working class enough, yada, yada. First of all, he's got to do that. And it's a great service to the Democratic Party that he's lambasting the Democratic Party. Otherwise, everyone would be looking at the Democratic Party being like, okay, so they have nobody who's honest in that party. He's the one guy being like, okay, these are all problems. And thank God. And I think people on the left are recognized. An amazing clip on CNN recently where one of the pundits was like, I think we need Bernie right now. Like, I think one of the two people who are going to be the most important at the moment are Bernie. He's the guy. Like, and everyone's coming back. And I just can't believe we hopped over that 2016 timeline. I mean, it's so shameful. But even when Bernie says if we had been focusing on the economy, we would have won this election, I don't think that's accurate. And when I think that people are like, yeah, but Kamala wasn't running on woke, or yeah, but she was running on some things, and she was, I don't know that it would have mattered. If we were to look, if I was to ask almost anyone who's paying attention to culture, what is the largest, most ascendant cultural phenomenon of the last 5 years? You'd have to say it's the manosphere. It's the general move to like hyper masculinity. Whether that's Joe Rogan, whether it's Jordan Peterson, it doesn't really, whether it's X itself, Elon Musk, like all of the stuff that's been happening, the newest member of culturally ascendant mainstream is definitely basically reactionary, anti-woke. And if we don't think that had some effect on the election, I was just looking at some interesting numbers. Since 2020, this is Pennsylvania, the number of registered Democrats in the state decreased by more than 320,000, whereas Republican registration saw a marginal decline of 1,400. And then when we get to new registrations, North Carolina increased 156,000 new Republican registrations, while Democratic registrations declined by 126,000. So, you know, that delta is then whatever, like 300,000. So you get like this picture where now these are registrations. Who usually registers to vote? Young people. Now, there was also some interesting data where we saw that young men and young women are becoming increasingly more liberal, and young men are becoming increasingly more conservative. Now, we would think, oh, well, then that's an even split. So Democrats and Republicans equally benefit from that. But no, because both young men and women used to be primarily Democrats. So women were already Democrats. So the Democrats lost the young men. They didn't gain women. They already had the women. And I think that these things are a factor, of course, the border wall and so on. But I didn't know anyone who was like, I really like tariffs. Like, I didn't know anyone who cared about that. It was really like cultural issues. And I think it's been a long time. I think that even discussing that an election was won on cultural issues, it's been the economy stupid for 50 years. Maybe the last time it was run on cultural issues was, I don't even know, Johnson. I couldn't
Right.
tell you. Maybe
Yeah.
McCarthy was running and lost.
McCarthyism, right? That era. Yep.
Yeah, well, McCarthyism, and then McCarthy. What was his name? Who ran against fucking Nixon or whatever. But yeah, I don't know and McCarthyism, of course, was definitely an era, post-war sort of like anti-commie sort of stuff. But we're in an era of like cultural politics, and I remember something like Steve Bannon said something like, "Oh, if the left wants to run on identity politics, that's great. We will mop the floor with them because that's actually our bread and butter. We just haven't been doing that." And I think we're in an era where on the left we're like, "Oh, this is it, identity politics. We're just going to run the tables using identity politics because everybody wants to feel." But we're losing Latinos, and I think when I talk to below the poverty line, and I do a lot of work in this area, so like, but below the poverty line, Black folk and like Latino folk and so on, they just think Democrats are crazy. It's not even like they're just like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. And they don't even refer to woke, but they refer to trans stuff. They refer to, like almost a resentment at white woke people for trying to like overly woke Black people. Like they just think white people have gone crazy. And I don't even know how to have those conversations with them. I'm like, okay, yeah, interesting.
Really? Yeah, really interesting, and it's a different dynamic than you're going to see anywhere close to the mainstream. But even within sort of the, I guess you could call them alternative circles, it's not discussed in a way that is honest or reflective, and that's a huge problem. So, kind of last question here: what's from a grassroots standpoint, and I don't mean that in the organizational grassroots standpoint or the bumper sticker memification grassroots standpoint, but where does this start to change? Is it, to me, it's at the community level, it's at the neighborhood level or the peer group level, and can only filter out. This can't be top down. It doesn't seem like we're in a moment where one person can step in. At the same time, going all the way back to what you began with, maybe people are inclined to just tune into the one voice they have implied trust for, and that one voice could lead them in a direction that, from the standpoint of the left, is more productive. I'm not sure which is, and it could be both together, of course, but what's your instinct on where this flips?
Well, I was just thinking about this yesterday, actually, and I was thinking that just to be belligerent for a moment, let's just say that individuality or individualism has this sort of masculine mythos, and communalism has this sort of feminine mythos, and I think that bears out in a number of ways. But just rolling with that for a second, at the abstracted level, that's fine. You can say whatever you want. But at the real fundamental living level, of course, you need some semblance of a community. And so then when we get back to the reality of localism, the reality of the neighborhood, the reality of your congregation, that togetherness is, I think, inherently more a progressive atmosphere in the sense of simply the communal aspect. When that community tries to do something to improve itself, that is inherently a progressive move. If you collectively want to start a community garden or a community school, or you want to improve the streets on your own, like my favorite project that I'm involved in is basically the 501c3 that my band started and that I founded, which is to help facilitate community land trusts. And our flagship one that we've invested in and helped is one in Detroit, in Highland Park, called Avalon Village. And there's this amazing woman who runs the entire thing. She's at the absolute heart and soul and founder and so on, Mama Shu. And it is those types of, like, when we think, how do I want to change the world? And we start to think it scales beyond Dunbar's cap, beyond tribal scales. We start to think at the nation scale. We're already in such an abstraction, dealing with so many different kinds of people, that really it's almost like an exercise in despotism, like mental despotism. Like, oh, I want 5 billion people to act this way. And I almost, it's very easy to get helpless in that sense. But if we start a community land trust on 5 empty lots in our neighborhood, and we say, well, what would these be cool for? Well, we could have a little school because our schools got shut down over here, or we could have a park, or we could have a this. That's where you start to see the progressive spirit flourish and be totally indispensable. It's not like any conservative-minded person, like, it is conservation. You can be like, well, we make a park. Just like environmentalism is conservative, but it's progressive in the sense that you're communally doing something. And I think that the communal aspect of being together and doing something together that benefits the group is implicitly progressive. And so in a lot of ways, I'm trying to no longer parse my sense of progress and conservatism in terms of the political designations, but as the difference between communalism and individualism. And I think really all we need moving forward is to keep our eye on communalism. And in fact, when we see communalism happening on the right, I think we should celebrate it and treasure it, not like the strange communalism of xenophobia, which, like, we're becoming communal at the expense of keeping other people out and so on. But the projects which would make us feel like we are in a more togethery state. The last thing I'll say too, though, and this will sound controversial, and it definitely is, but there are facts that we could bring to bear on our political views as progressives that are the most facts of facts. They are fMRI studies of the brains of conservatives and liberals. They have been done numerous times. UCLA, College of London, and a few other universities have all done these studies where they study the brains of conservatives and liberals, and conservatives seem to have more gray matter in their amygdala. Liberals have more gray matter in their anterior cingulate cortex. The amygdala, which is the conservative, where conservatives have more gray matter, is the fight, flight, and freeze fear center of the brain. So, of course, that tracks, right? They want more walls. They want to have their guns. They want a bigger army. All of these things which imply a fear of otherness, a fear of safety, a real extreme desire for a sense of safety. And so there was a guy, a professor at Yale, Dr. Barg, who saw all these fMRI studies. Was like, I wonder if I could conduct a study that would attempt to temporarily turn conservatives liberal. And so I guess the only way I could do that, he thought, was to somehow calm their amygdala. So he brought them in, gave them these meditations that made them feel totally wrapped in warm light and impervious to harm and totally safe. And then he gave them these questionnaires, and they answered them suddenly, because he did it twice, one without the process and meditation, one with. They answered them indistinguishably from liberals. Now, what does that mean? Well, we don't progress in a vacuum. I think that I actually, I should have started this entire conversation with this. Progress, we always think, well, how do we progress faster, harder, deeper? Well, just go harder, be louder, just do it more. The faster we push, the faster change happens. But that would be if progress happened in a vacuum of progressivism. We happen to have counterparts, which happen to be about 50% of the population, who are literally born different. They have a biological predisposition to using their amygdala more than we do, and we have a biological predisposition to using our anterior cingulate cortex more than they do. The anterior cingulate cortex is about pattern matching, which again is very entropic, very entropy, right? This is the same as this. They're just like me. We're all the same. And they're like, no, they're different, right? Now, if you have a child who's afraid of the dark, and you just throw them in the dark room, you're like, get used to it, kid. Well, they might develop like a trauma response against darkness and never want to be in the darkness again. So what do? Well, you introduce a little night light, you let them know it's okay, you introduce it gradually, suddenly they're good with the dark. Now, in this case, let's say it's the light. We want to introduce Republicans and conservatives slowly to the light. Well, slowly? What do you mean? Haven't you ever heard Nina Simone's song, Mississippi Goddamn? We can't go slow. We got to go fast. But the problem is that we keep forgetting that we have a counterpart who is, if we keep going fast, we're going to trigger their amygdala. They're going to over-respond, overcorrect in the other direction. And that's why progress happens slowly. Progress happens slowly because we have a counterpart who keeps responding and reacting almost in commensurate force. The harder we go, the harder they push. And it's just a shitty thing to say, and it doesn't feel good to admit that we have these folks that we actually need to deal with. We need to bring them along. The progresses that actually maintain themselves and stay are the progresses that we're able to convince conservatives, our counterpart, our progress is worth keeping. So we have to somehow bring them along. We can't just continue to belligerently tell them, override them. And I think that's the big lesson in this, because we're about to see so many reversals, for instance, on environmentalism. He said verbatim, I want to set the pro-Palestinian movement back 25 to 30 years. That's the kind of thing that happens. And it's not that we shouldn't be pushing for these issues. It's not that we shouldn't be educating on these issues, but we should consider that when we try and be as brazen as possible, what we are always going to do is basically supersize our enemy, supersize our opponent, and they're going to end up pushing back. So we do some very unnecessary things, like defund the police was a very unnecessary moment for us. We knew that like the rhetoric wasn't correct. It wasn't even what we meant. Defund the police implies a total defunding of the police. But that's not what we meant. We meant like a little bit, but we didn't care about the nuance. We wanted to be fuck you. And the response, of course, we're feeling now. So anyway,
reallocation of the police doesn't have the same
ring. So right now I sound like a centrist, but actually what I'm trying to advocate for is faster progress that actually maintains itself, not 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's how you get somewhere. Even the big revolutions of history are actually evolutions in disguise. Like, okay, slavery was abolished, replaced by slave wage labor and Jim Crow. Lastly, I'll just say, like, the election's over, so whatever. Abraham Lincoln was the lesser of 2 evils. Abolitionists thought Abraham Lincoln was an absolute fucking bullshitter, slavery apologist. I've like looked deeply into this, and he was running against these two other folks in the primary whose names I'm not remembering at the moment, who were actually vocal abolitionists. One of them was quite popular. And the abolitionists of the day, you can read quotes that were in the papers of the day that were just from the left, that were just destroying Abraham Lincoln. Like, this is a disaster. If we go down this route, slavery is going to be here for another fucking million years. Every big major, FDR as well, every big major piece of progress has been in America has been presided over a lesser of two evils. We get confused because we're inside of the moment, and it feels slow when you're inside of the grass growing. Then later, 5 weeks, you leave, you go on a vacation, you come back, wow, the grass got tall. Yeah, because you weren't there watching it. When you're inside of it, it feels like it's not happening. And I think the thing the left needs to stop doing is saying change is not happening, nothing's changing, both parties are the same. This absolute equivalency that doesn't exist, this total erosion of truth in favor to just fuel the revolution is really destroying our sense of reality. And I get that it's a great rallying cry, but I think it's shooting ourselves in the foot. So that's me, age 46 now, being very, seemingly centrist. But there's no one on, like, if the time was right for a real full-blown revolution, I'd be advocating for it. But the time is not right when a despot in the wait is about to take the reins. Like, all we're going to do is manifest the actual despot. Like, dictator yet? No, but if we do X, Y, and Z, yes, he'll become a dictator. The timing isn't right. Things are context dependent. We don't live in a fucking progressivist vacuum. And anyway, so yeah, that's like my spewing of thoughts, Bill. I'm sorry I hogged so much of the airtime.
No, I'm glad you did. It's such an important discussion, and people are, by and large, not willing to. Maybe they're willing to have it, but they're not having it, or no one's asking them, or the right people aren't getting in front of the right spaces to elevate this type of conversation. And the last thing I'll say is that there's a very challenging, and it ties into that brain matter conversation, which is just incredibly fascinating, and it's going to send me down a rabbit hole for the next week minimum. But there's a metaphysical piece to this as well, that is raising the consciousness of the entire planet. And it sounds like it's suited for memification, but it's actually the opposite, because it really requires a resetting of just core values about what day-to-day life actually is, maybe means, if you want to ask that question. But that seems absent in a lot of the evaluation, not only of the election, but just the state of the world right now, that we have sunk way too far down and away from that which is metaphysically likely connecting us. Maybe it's where we're ultimately going to end up at some point, however many billion years from now. But we have to find a way to at least try to access that higher level of consciousness. And it's incredibly difficult to do that.
It brings to mind just that, even liberals have amygdalas. And we are constantly oscillating between, all of us are constantly oscillating between fear and courage. We're constantly oscillating between pattern matching and xenophobia. We are within ourselves a little microcosm of the political landscape. We can't get rid of our amygdala. If we didn't have our amygdala, our fight, flight, freeze, fear center of the brain, we wouldn't have survived as a species. We actually need our amygdala. As a progressive, it's very difficult to say we need the conservative. I mean, I can't even explain that to you as I say it, but I know that somehow we're stuck with them. And I know that I do need my amygdala, because there are plenty of instances where I need to use my fight, flight, and freeze center of my brain, because that's literally what's responsible for my survival a lot of the time.
Right.
There's another interesting study where, and I hate this study, where when their amygdala is hyperactivated, they are sometimes more likely to make the right gut decision about a given issue if they're in a state of fear. That's weird, because I'd like to think that we make dumb decisions when we're in a state of fear. But is there some wisdom to, for instance, border security? Is there some wisdom to some of the conservative positions? And if there is no wisdom to it, just like the child afraid of the darkness, and it's not a wise thing that the child is afraid of the darkness. Might it be wise of us to provide the nightlight so that they can come along a little easier? And I think about things like the wall. Well, what's our main criticism? It'll cost a bunch. Well, shit, not as much as an airplane craft carrier. Will it cost? Will it actually do anything? No, it's purely symbolic. Well, then what's our problem? Like, if it's only symbolic and it'll make them feel safe, it might even make them more culturally liberal. It might not, and I'm not saying it's the right solution, but the point is that, like, we're going to have to deal with the dialectic of left-right as a never-ending dialectic that we can't simply abandon for pure liberalism. It's just not the reality we live in. And hopefully we learn that lesson and engage with them, if not with them directly, with them in concept, because we haven't been doing that.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @Bill Bartholomew.